Hello everyone, this is Bob and Threadbare, and welcome back to the Crew 2.
I feel like I should recognize this boat, but there's so many of them. Oh!
Are you sure it's a boat?
You got me again, Bobbin.
Yep, that's right. We've only got 2 disciplines left at this point, and one of them is Hovercraft.
I've yet to even see a hovercraft in real life.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Do they just not come up where you live?
Yeah, I don't think they're, viable here. Oh man, that's just a gator. Are they all gators?
It's Gator Rush, so yeah, there's kind of a lot of gators. And yeah, it's requires 70, but I think I can take it with a 68.
Go for it.
You aren't required to meet the minimum recommendation for performance level. It's just easier that way.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, you saw this in my hangar earlier. You're not the one with the boats. I pointed it out then that I had made this.
It's pretty remote out here, isn't it? I had trouble finding the place.
Remote's how we like it. Thanks.
I think it's become pretty obvious. I forget a lot of things. Oh,
Hope you don't mind if I crush you.
was that a shark fin?
If you don't.
Get real. You're both
Probably
gonna lose
not.
my friend out there.
But yeah, something interesting about the Gator Rush events, specifically the Gator Rush, not all of the hovercraft events, is that
Wow.
you're up against Tucker.
Feels like driving a crab.
It feels like adrenaline, and that's what I'm here for.
And Sophia. Like, this is an off-road event, but Sophia from Freestyle has decided to join us,
Okay.
which makes sense because the hovercraft is actually the reward for beating the Freestyle events.
Oh.
And as for how the hovercraft performs, I've noticed basically 2 things about it.
I like this all-in-one vehicle. My pickup doesn't handle this well in swamps.
Oh look, did you see the crashed airplane, by the way?
I think I did.
We just passed a crashed airplane in the tree line. I'll point it out when we pass it again, because this is a 3-lap race.
Ooh.
But yeah, as for how they perform, the best way I can put it is always have your jets going at full blast if you can, because the hovercraft performs best when it's going at full speed. And the second thing to keep in mind is that basically think of it like the car or the vehicle that you're in is always drifting. Forever.
Okay.
So if you want to control yourself around a corner, you need to aim yourself at the corner. And then your inertia will do the rest. There it is, there it is.
Oh, there it was. And there's another one.
Yeah.
Huh.
This is the swamplands of Louisiana. There's a lot here that gets lost and never found.
That's pretty interesting. It's definitely a nice break
Like the view?
from
In off-road,
just
we leave the
woodlands.
beaten path to find the beauty of nature.
In freestyle, we leave the beaten path to find the fun. That's why we like to share our toys.
Oh, please. Get a room, you two.
The 2 nice aces.
Woo! You folk are a blast.
Thanks. You race like you mean it.
And you race like you need it.
Attention, Bobo the Clown has left the building.
This is reminding me of that genre of video games. You know, the top-down space game.
Oh?
Yeah, like you would always...
The kind where you turn the vehicle and you keep going the same way no matter what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that. Alright, so that was the Gator Rush. So how about this Gold Rush?
Alright. Oh. That Gator's got, like, a horde.
Yeah.
Like if it was a dragon.
The racers, my friends, are blowing in the wind.
Hero, you weirdo.
You've got the lead. Don't let it get to your head.
One other thing I would like to note is that the turbo mode, the nitrous in the in the airship, the airboat. Oh crap. The best use for it is to correct your direction after you take a turn.
Alright.
Because you don't have that much friction. The best using the nitrous to boost your speed is much more effective than it is in other vehicles. Because it doesn't do much for your top speed, but in terms of going from 0 to 60 as fast as possible, it's pretty effective. Like that. Assuming you don't, like, completely miss and hit a bunch of trees or something. Don't know, just hypothetically here.
It's interesting. You're never worrying about, like, the traction of your tires because you have zero traction. Well, no, you have zero grip, but total traction on the air.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't know about that guy in third who was just waving back and forth.
He's just having fun. And I guess it works given that there is a fourth.
Well, not for long there wasn't. By which I mean that despite being utterly terrible at hoverboating, I am competing for first again.
Well, I'm just here for there being, like, interplay between racers. It's always nice to see.
Yeah. Also, worth noting about the crew too is that they've got a lot of lights set up here in the swamp race. Like, not just the fact that they've got that all of the obstacles are self-lit, but there are also, like, lights set up along the side of the track, just lighting up the race. Alright, but there are 3 arenas for the hovercraft events. One of them is in the swamplands of Louisiana. One of them is up north in the Lake Michigan, which is one of the Great Lakes. I believe it is the westernmost one, not counting the Lake Superior.
Yeah. I'm struggling with the physics behind this.
Oh?
Did I ever tell you about the time
Well,
I met an amazing girl?
You're
in
now
the
in water.
Undercars?
You got out of the water. You
I kept ramming into her.
are dripping
totally
wet.
relaxed.
Is
You know, me behind the wheel? Yeesh.
I'm just wondering what is gonna happen, like with your inner tube there. If it's gonna freeze, if the ice buildup is gonna actually cause some damage.
The thing was,
Well, it might in real life.
and she was getting annoyed.
Yeah.
So she bumped me back really hard.
Yeah, Hero's got this story he's talking about in the background. Don't know if you've been listening to it.
Sorry, I wasn't.
Well, he was talking about this amazing girl he met while playing bumper cars. And
Wow.
how he accidentally bumped her, but she took it personally and bumped him back, and that's as far as he's gotten so far.
Alright.
But yeah, one note about Hovercraft is always take the shortcut. Because the speed you lose, you can always immediately make up for it by hitting nitrous. And this would all be sand, by the way. Pretty much completely sand. If it weren't covered in snow.
Oh.
And anyway, I think for the most part the skirts would be pretty safe for a racing event in Hovercraft, because all of the constant movement and such would keep it warm. Keep the
Alright.
keep the rubber from cracking and freezing. Plus they've got, you know, pretty involved compounds these days. Ones that can resist cold temperatures better than natural rubber ever could.
Whoa. That was a good turn there.
Yeah, like I said, man. Always take the shortcuts if you can find them. There's no reason not to.
Also, I don't know how else to say this, but I've been noticing that the skirt has sort of jiggle physics to it.
Yeah.
So that's a thing. That's a thing.
It's an interesting use for jiggle physics, isn't it?
Definitely. It's very wholesome.
Yeah, kinda gotta wonder if the inventors of jiggle physics ever thought it would be used for this. Shameful.
So where was I? Oh, so we just kept going at each other, and after the ride, well, one thing led to another, and our parents took us for ice cream. Did I mention we were 8? Hey, did you win? Congrats! I was distracted.
Huh. Okay. Sure.
That's our hero. Hi, my ECU part stock got full, so I'm clearing it out now.
Oh. Oh, right, you can do this now.
Yeah, you can always clear parts out. It's just that now that there's a point to doing so. Now there's a reason why you only have a limited stock.
Yeah, I've been playing Tales of Berseria, and they do pretty much the same thing. You turn stuff into goop and then put that goop on your best sword.
Well, here we are at the third of the 3 arenas for Hovercraft. Glacier National Park. That's up in Montana. I believe we've mentioned it before.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, I feel kind of sorry for those guys in the Hovercraft with the open cabin. Because here I am, nice and safe and toasty and warm inside of mine.
definitely odd how many winter events are happening when we're... Well, this is all getting posted in like June, July, right?
Yeah, well, the weather in-game doesn't really care about the weather out-of-game.
Yeah.
And plus I did this immediately after the other one, so basically when winter happens in one corner of the map, it shows up wherever you go when you fast travel. Yeah, so that's... Although sometimes it just snows in Florida, just for shits and giggles.
Why not?
Yeah. This is an interesting course, by the way.
What?
Oh, crap.
Oh, crap, that's right.
But yeah, it's interesting because you've got this sort of corkscrew portion of the race.
Oh.
Where you spiral up to the top of that one island and then leap off of it.
That's pretty cool. I mean, it's no ski jump, but yeah, definitely, you know, kind of an interesting little set piece.
Yep. Well, the ski jump is around this part of the country somewhere. Yeah, because of the concentrated map, the Glacier National Park is in spitting distance of Salt Lake City. But yeah, obviously this isn't the glacier itself. What we're on here is a lake. That's because Glacier National Park is actually a very, very big national park. It's one of the larger ones, sort of to match the size of the state it's in. But as such, there's a lot of zero to modest development throughout the park. And there are a few pretty big mountain lakes in the area, both inside the park and just outside of it. A lot of the towns in the area are basically there for tourists.
Well, I definitely like the looks of this place.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stark contrasts.
Yeah. A lot for tourists to do.
Mm-hmm.
At least if you like nature. But now I think it's time that we finish off the Gator Rush with the main event.
Oh no.
The top event. And I finally have a hovercraft that matches the requirement, too. And incidentally...
Alright.
Oh, there's a gator.
Oh!
Smacked it
Poor baby.
right into it. Yeah, the Gator Rush is actually the first DLC that was available for the Crew 2. Came out like a couple of months after the game itself. Yep, now we're back on the main event, so of course Tuck is back as the top competitor.
Alright.
And yeah, these vehicles do react like bumper cars if they smack into each other.
Makes sense. Somewhat.
Well, I suppose it makes similar reasons, because bumper cars also have very low friction because of how they work.
Oh yeah.
It's just that, you know,
I guess
they are designed to be bumped into each other, whereas hovercraft are kind of a little more sensitive. Like, causing this much damage might rupture the skirt, and then you'd just be dead in the water.
Yeah. There's also the fact that rubber tends to have more friction to it than bare plastic. But that is something I'd rather be thinking about if I were to actually make a simulator rather than something that's, you know, fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's some airboats right there in the water. We just passed a couple that were just by a dock.
Tucks right on you.
Let's give a big hand to our sponsor.
Alright. So, the Gator Rush main event I'm seeing is actually a bit more going through the open than the first event was.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it's because it was at night, but it seemed like it took place more in the swamps than this one is.
Yeah. There's this sizable out of water segment there. But... oh, there they are.
I was thinking more like a sizable on the water segment as opposed to going through all of the big trees. I imagine all the spectators are in that portion just there.
Yeah.
Which is just close enough to see the big jump.
I love it.
Although I do have to wonder how Hovercraft would normally react to big jumps like that. It's like if it hits the water so hard that the fans smack into the water, like, I can't imagine that going well.
I'm sure it'll be fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Nobody ever died of doing a sick jump off a ramp in a hovercraft.
Well, anyway, enough hovercrafting. It's time to get back to some of these new races. And today, well, what looks best? You know what? I may have to... yeah, I kind of had to get some new cars ready. So this is one of them.
What's the shopping trolley doing here?
It's Miami Harbor.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah, sure. I'll just pop off into this race on my way home from getting my incredibly expensive groceries.
Well, it's, you know homeless people use shopping carts for, like, carrying stuff, right?
Oh no, I was calling this car a shopping trolley.
Ah. Oh, because it's a Mercedes-Benz SUV?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you could say that it goes off-road, but the most off-road I see these things going is out of a parking lot
Well, I will say this: it might have to do with the wet pavement, but this vehicle does not like to turn.
That's quite a bit of understeer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a different experience from the Honda Civic that also hated to turn, but this one seems a little bit different because it's not traction. It's got plenty of traction. I mean, it's at least that much of an SUV. It just resents the fact that I want to move the steering wheel. It's like taking that personally and, oh, I just lapped somebody.
It did.
Huh. No, I'm playing this on easy mode with a topped-off vehicle, but still, that usually doesn't happen.
Yeah?
Kinda have to wonder what happened to that poor guy. But yeah, I'm...
Well...
I guess it kind of says how much of a car person you are that the first thing you thought about when you saw this vehicle was the model. And not for instance, the paint job.
Look... SpongeBob SquarePants is just fun. It's for everybody. Everybody loves the SpongeBob. See, look at him. But, like, in custom decal systems, it used to be that, like, getting this sort of subversion out of it would be a question of how many different patterns do I have to mash together until I get something that looks like what I'm going for. Whereas in this, you can put in a JPEG and there you go.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Although I would put in a ping if I were you.
Oh, I would too.
Pings are lossless for those of us who aren't aware.
Like...
Lossless means that they don't cut any corners and screw everything up with artifacting, for those of us who don't know.
I just want a picture of a goddamn hot dog.
So how about this car?
And for those of us who don't know... Yep.
I found one found one with a gold paint job.
Huh.
Seemed appropriate.
Yeah. Definitely for the sort of person that would buy, like, an up-trimmed Corvette. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is terrifying.
Yeah, it's pretty muddy out there in more ways than one.
Oh. Yep, there's a turn.
Yep.
There's another turn.
Pretty sharp there. Luckily, there is the map in the lower right-hand corner still there.
I tend to lose sight of that.
But yeah, this is the coastal range here. And there's the coast. Pacific Ocean.
Ah, yes.
And around the central California, the coastline is not at all a smooth or straight road. Well, that was a nice little attention to detail. Not only does the rain stop when you go into the tunnel, but so do your windshield wipers.
Yeah, that's neat. I remember when that was a new feature. Like, 2 actual cars.
The first ever windshield wipers?
No. Like, a rain sensor.
Oh,
that would then activate.
Yeah. Rain sensing windshield wipers. That is fairly new, yeah.
Like, there was probably a Mercedes S-Class back in like the early noughties that had that, but like, that's the S-Class. That's the test bed for all this luxury tech.
Yeah. Full size, full expense vehicles. Oh, the sun's coming out a bit now.
Oh, that's nice. Wait, depending on how high it is, that also could mean that you're gonna go blind.
Wait. Gonna go...
Well, if it's just been raining and the sun is low, then that means that not only do you have sunlight up in the sky, but also sunlight reflected off the road.
Well, luckily that's not too much of a problem here. I got a front bumper. Today, we're taking a look at a movie that was made as an homage to the old 70s action movies. It's a film called Death Proof, made by Quentin Tarantino, although it was originally released in 2007 as part of the Grindhouse double feature. The story about the story. I've already talked quite a bit about the 60s and 70s and how they revolutionized the Hollywood action movie. With the death of the production code, the guardrails were off, and the new Hollywood filmmakers were creating all kinds of counterculture movies with dark endings, anti-government motifs, and rebellious protagonists. And wouldn't you know it, but these movies had a big impact on the future writers and directors who grew up watching them. Quentin Tarantino is one of those directors whose works you can always identify even if you never see the credits. They have this idiosyncratic pacing to them that no one else can seem to match, and a lot of that comes from how his characters will take a break from the action and talk about nothing in particular for long stretches of time. And then there's a whole bunch of violence and gore, and in the middle of everything someone fawns over a woman's foot. Like I said, idiosyncratic. In the early 2000s, Tarantino made what might be the biggest movie of his career, Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. And in 2005, he worked with fellow director Robert Rodriguez to film a car chase scene for his extremely stylish film adaptation of Frank Miller's Sin City. The two had worked together before, and as it turned out, they were both fans of the low-budget action schlock that would show at Grindhouse theaters. Back in the 70s, the Grindhouse was where you went to see violent, gory movies or early pornography. And Tarantino's mother let him watch these films even though he wasn't even a teenager until 1976. Tarantino and Rodriguez decided that both of their next films should be homages to the 70s Grindhouse, with Rodriguez creating a zombie movie featuring a go-go dancer and a lot of guns, while Tarantino made Death Proof, a slasher movie about stunt driving. They made their movies simultaneously, with each director giving input and changing lines in each other's films, and they released it as a special double feature in movie theaters, complete with film grain effects, a missing reel on each film, and a bunch of fake movie trailers stuffed between them. Rodriguez would later turn one of those fake trailers, Machete, into an actual film, and one of the other trailer creators would do the same to Hobo with a Shotgun. Unfortunately, the double feature was a little too authentic for most modern film audiences, so while the film critics loved the inside jokes, the box office returns were a disappointing $25.4 million, not even close to the overall $60 million budget. It also didn't help that Death Proof is a fairly weak movie in Tarantino's filmography. Death Proof features a duel between two 70s muscle cars. The first is a white 1970 Dodge Challenger, basically the exact same car used in Vanishing Point and a deliberate reference on Tarantino's part. The other car is a black 1969 Dodge Charger, and while the year's a little different, this car is a reference to the bad guy's vehicle in the car chase from Bullet. It's also a reference to the General Lee, the Dodge Charger from the Dukes of Hazzard. Or maybe it's to another TV show called Street Hawk. And it's definitely a reference to the Charger from the movie Dirty Mary Crazy Larry. The filmmakers used a lot of Dodge muscle cars in the 70s. Oh, and because the 70s car film wouldn't be complete without one, there's also a 1972 Ford Mustang Grande, which is probably a reference to Eleanor from Gone in 60 Seconds, but could also be a reference to Uma Thurman's tracksuit in Kill Bill, which itself was a reference to Bruce Lee's tracksuit in Game of Death. I'd better stop now, or we'll be here all day. Instead, it's time we move on to the story. The movie begins with some authentic period credits, including a secondary title, Thunderbolt, since Grindhouse films would often run under 2, 3, even 4 different names to get extra mileage out of a single film. I should also add that this is the complete version with the cuts and missing reel restored, so the total film length has gone up from about an hour and a half to just under 2 hours. Also, like a 70s film, the credits all come at the beginning of the movie instead of at the end. Except it also still has the long credits at the end because union rules have changed since the 70s. Also, while the movie has a lot of 70s nods, it takes place in the present day. The movie begins by transgressing all the old boundaries. A black woman as a sexual object, underwear, drug use, swearing, and mentioning bodily functions like pissing. The woman in question's name is Julia, aka Jungle Julia, a popular radio DJ in Austin, Texas. She and her 2 friends Arlene and Shanna are driving to a Mexican bar to celebrate Julia's birthday. Julia and Shanna get into an argument pretty much immediately, but apparently that's just how those 2 are. They then talk about their casual relationships with men, as a black 1971 Chevy Nova seems to follow them, and Arlene sees it stop in front of the bar before driving off like some kind of creep. They head in and meet another woman named Marcy. Marcy mentions that Julia talked about Arlene on the radio, and apparently Julia said that if a man walks up to Arlene, calls her butterfly, buys her a drink, and then recites part of the poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost, then Arlene will give him a free lap dance. Julia does give her an out, though, by saying that she'll only do it to the first man who says the poem, so she can always lie if someone she doesn't like asks. Later on, as the girls move to a new bar, we see the man in the Black Nova again, and it's clear that he's been stalking these 3 women in particular. The new bar is a Texas roadhouse, and Quentin Tarantino has a cameo as the bar's owner. Arlene goes outside for a smoke and notices the Nova from before, but then a guy from the bar asks her to make out, and after some negotiation, she agrees. We then meet retired stuntman Mike McKay, played by Kurt Russell, who's pigging out on some nachos at the bar. A blonde woman, also at the bar, calls out for a ride, and Mike tosses over his keys as an offer. He tells her he's good to drive because he's been drinking club soda all day, and he only hangs out in bars to enjoy the food and meet new people, and pick up women. Later that night, Mike introduces himself to Julia as if he hadn't been stalking her all night. Then, when the girls are all about to end the night, Mike buys Arlene a drink and recites the poem. Arlene is suspicious of him since she saw his car a few times, and Julia tries to get her out of the lap dance, but Mike calls her out, and so she does it. Incidentally, the lap dance was the missing reel from the theatrical release. The idea is that projectionists would steal the best reels for themselves, and that's why they would be missing from the theatrical version. Afterwards, the blonde woman Pam prepares to go home with Mike, and they get to talking about his car. He says that his car is a stunt car and death-proof, meaning the vehicle can get into a serious accident but protect the driver from permanent damage. But only the driver. A few minutes after leaving the bar, Mike starts beating Pam up by taking sharp turns, and then kills her by slamming on the brakes and smashing her head into the dashboard. He then proceeds to catch up to the girls on their way to the lake home and hits them in a head-on, high-speed collision that kills all four. We see some interesting gore effects, and Tarantino throws in a Wilhelm scream, apparently just for the hell of it. The scene cuts to the hospital where Mike is recovering from the accident. Texas Ranger Earl McGraw thinks that Mike intentionally killed those women, but he can't prove it, and the DA thinks the women caused the crash because they were all drunk and stoned while Mike was sober. Earl speculates to his son that Mike gets off on killing women like this, but since he can't do anything about it, he'll go watch NASCAR instead. So, we're halfway through the movie, and much like Psycho, our initial female protagonist is dead. So we jump over to 14 months later in Lebanon, Tennessee, where Mike is stalking a new set of victims. He's got a new car, the 1969 Dodge Charger I described in the first segment. His targets this time are three women named Abernathy, Kim, and Lee, and they're in town in an old Ford Mustang to pick up their friend Zoe Bell from the airport. Fun fact, Zoe Bell is her real name, and she performs her own stunts. Bell was Uma Thurman's stunt double in Kill Bill, and she impressed Tarantino so much that he gave her a leading role for this film. Mike continues to stalk the women as they leave the airport and start driving around, talking about the movie they're all a part of and the men they're all seeing. They then stop at a restaurant, and during a long single-take shot, they mention a few plot points. Zoe is remarkably agile, and Kim carries a holdout pistol. And then they keep talking, because that's what this movie mostly is. A bunch of single-take shots of women having long conversations. Anyway, they eventually get back to the plot when Zoe says she wants to drive a 1970 Dodge Challenger with a 440 engine, since that's the one from Vanishing Point, and she happened to check the local classifieds back in New Zealand and found out a Challenger just went up for sale not far from town. She doesn't want to buy it, but she does want to test drive it and have some fun. So they head out to the farm where the mint-condition Challenger is, they admire it for a minute, and then Zoe talks Kim into playing Ship's Mast, an apparently dangerous game that Zoe swore she would never do again. Abernathy wants to come too, so she talks the owner into letting them take the Challenger out by insinuating that Lee is a porn star and will do things for him if he lets the rest of them take the car out for a spin. So they go out and they play Ship's Mast, which involves exiting the car at speed, climbing onto the hood, and using nothing but a couple of belts to hold on. And this is so exciting that it causes Mike to go after them early. So begins the main car chase of the movie, as Mike smashes repeatedly into the ladies' car. He mostly just toys with them, tapping the car just enough to knock Zoe around without knocking her off. And when they both finally spin out, he laughs, gets out of the car, and tells the girls thanks for the fun, but it's time for him to go. And then Kim shoots him in the arm. So Mike gets in his car and flees, and the three women agree to go chase him down and kill that son of a bitch. Zoe grabs a pipe for a lance, mounts the passenger door like a horse, and off they go. Mike got a head start, but he isn't doing so well. The gunshot wound hurts a lot, and as he tries to pour some whiskey on it, the women come up from behind him and smash his car. This hurts him even more since he had to take off his safety harness, and Zoe adds to that by smacking him in the head with her pipe. But he manages to drive off, and so the chase is back on, but with the roles reversed. They jump off a big dirt ramp and end up on the main highway. They weave through some traffic, and when Mike apologizes to the ladies, they are not interested. He almost loses them at one point, but then they come back and hit him in the rear quarter and flip his Charger. The women then pull him out of the wreckage so that they can repeatedly punch him in the face, and once they cave in his skull, the credits roll. The cars. Today, I'm going to interrupt my automaker overview because the vehicles from the video are very unique and worth discussing. So instead of cars, let me talk to you about airboats and hovercraft. First, I should provide a definition. I've been using the terms airboat and hovercraft interchangeably, but they aren't actually the same thing. Airboats are flat-bottomed boats that move around thanks to a giant fan on the back. If you replaced the fan with a regular motor, or grabbed a couple of oars, it would still work like a boat. A hovercraft also uses a fan to move around, but they have more fans underneath, or redirect some air, to create an air cushion. If you take all of the air fans out of a hovercraft, it won't go anywhere. The airboat was officially invented in 1905 by Alexander Graham Bell, the same guy who got the first patent on the telephones. At that point, though, it was a fairly obvious idea. The Wright brothers performed their famous flight 2 years earlier, and propellers had been pushing blimps and other lighter-than-air vehicles for years. In fact, many inventors at that time were using boats to test aircraft propellers, so all Bell did was build the propeller into the boat, instead of just strapping it onto the top. However, inventors of the time also had to deal with small, unreliable engines and simple boat designs that created a lot of drag and slowed everything down. As such, the airboat was nothing more than the toy of the inventor up until World War I. Aircraft technology advanced by leaps and bounds during the war, and so, in 1915, the British Army strapped a much more powerful airplane propeller to a flat-bottom boat and created the first airboat capable of going 55 miles per hour. They used airboats for reconnaissance on the Tigris River during the Mesopotamian campaign against the Ottoman Empire. After creating a prototype from a salvaged biplane engine, the Army got their airports from Charles de Lambert, a French aviator. And after the war, de Lambert would supply airboats to China, the United States, and the French colonies. In the 1930s, the modern airboats started taking shape, particularly in the Florida Everglades. This is when they created a protective cage for the propeller, and this both protected the propeller from obstacles like low-hanging tree branches, and it protected the passengers from the propeller. However, the first airboat to have an air rudder was created in Utah in 1943 by a group of wildlife scientists. Earlier airboats had water rudders, like a normal boat, and while the air rudder made the boat harder to control, it also removed the last thing that could get caught in mud or trapped by seaweed. Now, the defining trait of the hovercraft is that it doesn't rest on any solid surface. Instead, it hovers over a cushion of air that reduces friction to almost nothing and allows the craft to float over both land and water surfaces. The way it does this is by inflating a skirt made out of a material like plastic or rubber, something durable enough to hold in the air cushion and hit a few tree branches without splitting, but also flexible enough to hug the ground or water below even as the contours change. The way the physics work is that the fans blowing down create an area of high-pressure air that inflates the skirt. Incidentally, high-pressure air is how everything inflates. And just like how high-pressure air in tires can hold up a car, high-pressure air in the skirt can hold up a hovercraft. The difference is that the air cushion itself, rather than the tire rubber, is the main contact point with the ground. This makes the hovercraft almost frictionless, which has both pros and cons. But the biggest downside is that the fans have to keep blowing continuously to keep the skirt inflated, and that can use up a lot of power. The concept of the hovercraft goes back to the 19th century at the very least, but they didn't have engines strong enough and light enough to create the right effect. Still, the real difficult part wasn't coming up with the idea of pointing a fan downwards or getting an engine to power it. The hard part was developing a skirt able to hold all of that air in. In the 1930s and 40s, scientists in Finland, the Soviet Union, America, and the UK all began experimenting with skirt ideas. But it wasn't until after the war that Sir Charles Cockerell of England was able to create and then sell the first practical hovercraft. Modern hovercraft have a lot of different uses, and it turns out the design is surprisingly easy to scale up. Hovercraft can run on just about any surface, so they see a lot of use in cold areas that have to deal with half-frozen lakes, and in swampy areas where you can't trust the water depth and the seaweed will foul your propeller. Hovercraft can also go on land, so rescue crews use them during floods, and militaries use them as amphibious assault vehicles. You'll also see them used as passenger and car ferries, but that's more of a gimmick, and these days they've mostly been replaced by more fuel-efficient boats. Then there's racing, because of course there's racing. Hovercraft racing is mostly a British sport, since that's where the first commercial hovercraft came from. There are races held in America and the rest of Europe, but it's not as big. Thanks for joining me again for today's movie and car review, and I hope I'll see you next time for a classic car heist movie, which happens to be one of the many I referenced in the first segment.